panelists will probably join you soon.
Okay. So should I start, right?
Yes, please do so.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to join now this panel. And this is a very interesting and important panel. It's called Crisis and Response, the Cultural Underpinnings of Action. This panel, we invited 3 VIP speakers. The first one is Rose LUQIU, and we often call her as a 战地玫瑰. It's referred to 20 years ago when she was a journalist. She did a lot of great reporting there. Now she is an academic. So first, I would like to introduce her briefly, then let her say something about culturally speaking in this crisis. LUQIU is an assistant professor at the School of Communication, the Hong Kong Baptist University. She researched censorship, propaganda, and the social movements in authoritarian regimes. She has been a journalist for 20 years and was a 2007 Lehman Fellow at Harvard University. She received her PhD in mass communication from University of Pennsylvania State and earned her bachelor's degree in philosophy from Fudan University. I'm very honored to invite her speak first. Then we have another 2 VIP speakers, HUANG and Dr. Zhang Ren. I will introduce one by one. Each one will have 20 minutes around to deliver their message before we starting a debate and a discussion. Let me invite Rose to speak first.
Okay, thank you, Professor Huang. And this is my honor to be here to join this panel. I'm really looking forward to hear from Huang. I haven't seen you for a long time, but I know you're very active in recent years, a lot of issues. And also Professor Zhang later to share their thoughts and observations about this cultural perspective on this pandemic. So let me start from my own experience, some of my stories. Let me start from SARS, because SARS, that was 2003. I was in Beijing. I vividly remember that was in February. I was covered the National Congress meeting, the 2 sessions in Beijing. That was February. Already a lot of rumors. Something happened in Guangdong province. So me and a lot of Hong Kong journalists, we were very, very busy chasing senior officials of the Chinese government and trying to figure out what's going on in Guangdong province. Unfortunately, we got no answer. So that was February. And then in March, I was sent to by my company to Iraq. So I didn't have any many information about what's going on in Beijing, about the what's going on in Hong Kong. But I do watch news on television in Baghdad. Something happened in Hong Kong and the other cities in China. For example, in Hong Kong, the first case was started in March. I think it was early March. And then came to the community breakout. It's just because the housing estate known as MOA Garden, and a total of 329 residents in that estate came down with the disease, and 33 died. So that was what I got in Baghdad. And at the end of April, and then I was assigned to Beijing to cover SARS in Beijing. Why I had the opportunity to cover what's going on in China, it's just because the senior, the leadership of China, they admitted what's going on, and they had, I remember they had a press conference, And also they changed the mayor of Beijing. So I had an opportunity to shadow then the mayor of Beijing was Wang Qishan, and to cover how the Chinese government deal with SARS. But at that time, I think that was May. I spent the whole month in Beijing. But for people in Hong Kong, May 2003 is also a terrible memory for them, because that was the third phase began in early May, with continually occurrence of the disease in 8 hospitals and more than 100 housing estates throughout the city. But with the daily numbers of new cases declining. So I was in Beijing, but when I look back, I was not that worried or even not panicked, although my family members were in Hong Kong and my friends. I just asked myself why I was not panicked or was not worried so much. I think it's just because I think I thought in Hong Kong, it's an open society. So it has free flow of the information. So for citizens, they are able to get a lot of information and to protect themselves better compared with the people in a closed society, because the information was controlled and the people were not able to get more information to be better prepared. And I also was not worried. It's just because media played a role as a watchdog. Instead of just provide like positive energy, positive reporting, which so they were very harsh against the government. So the Hong Kong government got a lot of criticism by the public and the media, so which pushed them to be better. And also I was believed in the healthcare system in Hong Kong, because the Hong Kong government, they spend many resources, and also in Hong Kong they have very professional and responsible medical workers. Although after May 2003, there's a lot of reflection and a lot of lessons learned, which including at the government level to improve health policy and the management, because we do find a lot of problems during the crisis, during the epidemic. So for example, like there was also a deficient communication between the secretary minister level responsible for health policy and the management level responsible for operation of the hospitals. And also healthcare workers were put at special risk by certain procedures, including using of nebulizer. And if you still remember, by June 2003, 386 medical, nursing, and the other healthcare workers in the hospitals and clinics have developed SARS, and 8 of them, 4 doctors, 1 nurse, and 3 healthcare assistants had died. So that was the lessons which learned from the government level, because good governance and management is so important when you're dealing with a pandemic like SARS, and now we are talking about COVID-19. And what did the citizen learn? After I came back from Beijing and back to Hong Kong, I do feel Hong Kong changes a little bit at the place where I was familiar. For example, people do increase public awareness of public health. So if you walk around in Hong Kong after SARS, you will see Hong Kong residents are consciously wearing masks and washing their hands when they have headaches and fever. And hospitals and the government and schools are equipped with alcohol disinfection and mask, and the lift doors and handrails in buildings are cleaned and disinfected once an hour sometimes. So this is what's changed the behavior of the individual and the society because of the SARS. And also people in Hong Kong, you can see the awareness of crisis, the sense of awareness of crisis are increased. This is I can feel very strongly during at the beginning of the COVID-19. I still remember in January, early January, I was in Taipei because I brought students to Taipei to observe the election. And at that time, already some reports in Hong Kong said a disease which is similar as SARS happened in Wuhan. So people were very cautious and sometimes a little bit intense. So there's a shortage of a mask in Hong Kong. So I asked my students to trying to buy some masks in Taipei. And when they went to Ximending, the most popular area, the Hong Kong tourists love, and they couldn't find masks. And the sales lady told them, the sales lady and the gentleman told them that, oh, the mask were all bought by you Hong Kong people. I don't know what's happened, but you guys just came to our shop everywhere in Ximending and they're trying to get the mask. So you can feel it's the awareness of a crisis. But I just think why people are so nervous or react in this way. I think it's the one lesson we learned from SARS. It's the unequal relationship between Hong Kong, Guangdong province, and Beijing, and the one country, two system. So that will prevent the smooth flow of important information to Hong Kong. So people learned from SARS. So this time they have to be very cautious, although there was not many reports at that time in mainland China and media outlets. So we got the information a lot from Hong Kong local media and the international media. So that is the one reason. I think the other reason is the Chinese closer political system make people scared and might be causing some threats. So it's better to be cautious and to be better prepared, especially in case of emergency. If people still remember, like the real awareness of the mainland public, raised the awareness of the mainland publics is because of one of the reporting from Caixin. They interviewed a professor from Hong Kong University, Guan Yi, I still remember, and he mentioned a series of the possibility of human-to-human infections. Because before that, we can again hear the officers of Wuhan said, okay, don't worry, everything under control. And I remember after back from Taipei, I joined a seminar in a local university in Hong Kong. We had some guests and speakers from Wuhan. They have no idea what's going on. They would feel so strange. Why we need to wash our hands every time we enter the conference room? What's going on? Why you Hong Kong people are so anxious about that? And I have to explain what's going on and all the information I get from Hong Kong media and the international media, and it makes them to be aware and to remind them it might be better to be more cautious and to have some precautious measures would be better. And also, in addition, the rapid intensification of contacts between Hong Kong and mainland will bring about many problems that have yet not be fully exposed. I mean, that's the lesson what Hong Kong people learned from the SARS. And another change, I think, during the SARS and also during this pandemic, I can see is the cohesiveness of the society. Yes, SARS, which caused a lower level of trust to the government got a lot of criticism, but then because of the boom of economic booming, as it seems getting better. But now, as you know, the lower level of trust in government and for which are pushing the individuals and the citizens to form the very touching mutual aid society. People just not only care about themselves, help themselves, they also care about each other, and especially care about those underprivileged group of people. for example, like when the society lack of masks, so different sectors of the society trying different ways, trying to provide more resources to the citizens. So finally, I want to use a quote which I read in a newspaper in 2003. I couldn't remember the writer's name, but he or she wrote a sentence wrote this in a newspaper article. It said, "I believe that the epidemic will return, but if it is meant to, I hope that when it does, it will be fair and will not affect the innocent again." I don't know what to say, because till today, over 100 people here in Hong Kong died. And if the government and the whole society react much better, and maybe we can have a better result. I mean, less people will lose their life. So by forgetting the pain in our collective memory, after SARS, you can see some people in power, they trying to change the narrative of the collective memory, and they're trying to rewrite the history. But the thing is, if we abandon the sufferers, the survivors, the marginalized, our society has also left the opportunity to reflect and rethink and improve the existing systems, lifestyles, etc. So it happened after SARS. A few people just do the reflection, whether the whole society should change the way of life and change some culture, and also to change or improve the governance. But we do miss the opportunity, and I hope it will not happen after COVID-19. Yeah, that's my sharing. Thank you very much, and looking forward to other speakers.
Thank you, Rose. May I now introduce the second speaker, Hong Huang. Her topic is cultural tolerance and acceptance. Hong Huang is a quite famous, figure in China. She is the author, blogger, media figure, and a publisher. Huang has been concerned with women's issue since 2003, when Sinoblog was the most influential platform for new thinking in China. Her blog challenges traditional concepts of gender in China and encourage a generation of women to fight for gender equality. Between 2005 and 2016, Hong Huang devoted herself to promoting local Chinese fashion industry. She was the publisher and editor of a local fashion magazine called LUQIU. She was also the founder of the first designer concept store in China. In 2017, Huang was shocked by the backlash to encouraging Chinese women to adapt Confucius thoughts on gender behavior. She launched a podcast called Girls Power, talk about feminism and the women's issue. Now let's welcome Hong Huang to give us some message and a speech. Thank you, Hong Huang.
Thank you, Professor Huang. Nice to meet everyone. And Professor LUQIU, so good to see you again after such a long time. I want to talk about sort of a cultural prejudice that I have encountered during this past pandemic. It is very ironic to me that in the case of a pandemic, and as in the case of global warming, what you need is for countries to work together, because these are global problems. No country can solve it on their own. And you need people to actually bind together and have the same set of precautions and so on and so forth. But it obviously did not turn out to be the case. From my own experience, it's very interesting because I was scheduled to go to TED conference in Vancouver this year as a speaker. And as you already know, the TED conference was canceled. The whole conference was turned online in a format not dissimilar to the seminar. And during the entire conversation in April that I had with TED's editor, Helen, I think one of the things that constantly came up is the politicizing of a disease. And the way that it doesn't matter how China dealt with it, it seems to be a political point of view, however you transmit what you have witnessed in China. And this time it's very actually sharp to me, simply because I was in China when Wuhan was locked down. I was in China when Dr. Li was made to make a self-criticism letter, and I witnessed the protest on internet, on social media, on WeChat, on Weibo. It's very interesting how on Toutiao and all these platforms almost happened at the same time. They're just, I think on Weibo you can see there just means to be hundreds of people who changed their headshot to that picture of Dr. Li with the mask. And there are candles when he died. And so the verdict, the political verdict on Dr. Li was changed in the middle of the night. Within like 2 hours, I think the official press had changed their verdict from, you know, someone who was a bad whistleblower to a good whistleblower. That just actually in the middle of the night, somewhere between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning, as you watch, everybody was excited, everybody was angry, and we watched, and that just came out sometime around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning from the official press, which I was amazed because as Professor LUQIU, I also lived through SARS, and the way that SARS was actually announced to the public, it was because a Dr. Jiang from a military hospital called 301 in Beijing, who gave an interview to Sunlian News Weekly, and it was on the cover, and he was the one who talked about SARS as an epidemic that is going around in China and warned people. And at the time, the editor-in-chief of Sunlian is a friend of mine, a very respected editor called Zhu Wei. I'm sure Professor LUQIU also knows him. And he was very much under pressure after he's put Dr. Jiang on the cover, but also relatively quickly, the government reacted. So I use both cases to actually talk about how in a authoritarian regime situation, the government actually react to the public through media, through social media, so that there is a communication that goes on. And when the pressure gets to a certain level, it does change, if not policy, but certain rhetoric. And so that was one thing that I wanted to talk about. And then it was a constant. I mean, I have friends in America. I'm American, and I understand their shock and complete opposition to the fact that to those of us who are living in Beijing through the pandemic, we, around the same time, around April, end of April, I think we could go out, but when you go into you have to download a health app, and then wherever you go, you're scanned. When I'm in Shanghai right now, so when I get to the airport, when I enter the airport, I'm scanned. Everybody has to have masks on. Your temperatures are taken. And this already took place in April. And it was a huge point of discussion between myself and the editor at TED that this a violation of individual rights. I think I tried to convince her that in the Chinese culture, there's no one protesting these measures, because maybe it is our culture to ask the government to do these things in order to protect us. Maybe it is somehow in our cultural DNA that we respect authority way more. We expect authority to do more. And we follow authority way more because we expect them to do these things. But, you know, as someone who is Chinese American, who's lived in China for the past 30 years, I admitted openly on TED that I actually felt safer. The fact that I was scanned everywhere I went, I didn't object to it. It wasn't so much that I was thinking, oh my God, you know, everybody's gonna know I went to Sunny Twin for a croissant this morning and I picked up coffee at Indigo. This is a terrible thing. I was happy to be scanned. I was happy to be taken temperature. Somehow it reassured me that I'm entering into a facility where everybody else had also undergone the same precautions. And therefore, I culturally, either because I lived in China for too long or because I was scared, or whatever reason, culturally, I was very much like everyone else living in Beijing. We accepted and in some ways welcome these measures being taken. And so as I am on social media, I sincerely believe the bewilderment by the Chinese at the reaction of Americans and British and Europeans against these measures and protests and, you know, the hesitance to wear masks and so on and so forth. I think the shock, you know, very much sometimes the Chinese people think that all the xenophobia, all the anger, all the misunderstanding is worked up by the government. But at this time, I have to say, you know, the kind of bewilderment by the Chinese at the Western reaction to the pandemic was quite genuine. It's like, what are you doing? It's for your own good. Wear a mask, for God's sake, you know. And so I think there is a huge cultural divide. And I, for one, think that, you know, I'm so happy to be at this conference is because I think this needs to be talked about. And so I think it's a wonderful thing that people can share different cultural experiences instead of politicizing everything, because I think right now there's a little bit too much politicizing, and a little bit too little, there is a lack of effort to collaborate. It's always a race to get a vaccine out. Why is it a race? You know, vaccines should be safe. We know there's an anti-vaccine movement in the United States. There isn't one in China. And there were vaccine, you know, issues in China, which was very public. So basically, somewhere between what America and European culture and sort of where Chinese culture, there is a vast gap, or it's sort of there's so little faith in the government, ironically, in democracies. But there seems to be faith in the government in a non-democracy society. I mean, it perplexes me. It completely, I think these are issues that I don't have answers for. But since I have watched through all this, I have lived through all this, it's more that I want to offer an opportunity to discuss this, because during the pandemic, I was going through my bookshelf trying to get just to catch up on reading, and I happened to come across a study of my grandfather's writing 100 years ago about the lack of political tolerance and collaboration in China, which is called, it's collaboration was termed 妥协, means more, what is 妥协? 妥协 means more conciliation. So so I think perhaps there is a need for that, but I think at the basis of the lack of it is the lack of cultural understanding. It is getting worse rather than better. Right now in China, there has been a lot of backlashes about, for example, if I go on the internet, I'm not a Trump supporter, so I would go on the Chinese social media and express my opinion about American politics. And it is amazing how many Trump supporters you have who are Chinese who come to my social media and attack me because I do not support Trump. And the kind of, and then there are also a lot of Chinese discussion about who are these people who are supporting Trump? Why are some Chinese supporting Trump? And there are a lot of sort of controversy about a very good writer for the New Yorker. I think her name is Fan Jiayang, and the way that she talked about her mom. So the whole thing is a very nasty tone. So it is not, this cultural divide between the West and the East has actually internalized itself among Chinese, from those who feel that they're, these are, whether what Fan Jiayang wrote on the New Yorker, either about a Chinese sci-fi writer or about her experience during COVID, or whether Trump is a decent politician or not, are not Chinese issues, but yet they are dividing the Chinese, even on Chinese social media in mainland China. So I think there need to be some kind of depoliticization of things. Everything is super political and everything is taken from a political point of view. But one never tried to explain the cultural differences in the world. And I think to solve pandemics and global warming, probably we need a lot more cultural understanding than we have now. Thank you.
Oh. Sorry, we are actually waiting for the third speaker, Professor Zhang Run's arrive. But for some reason, we could not connect him now. So may I invite Raymond LI now, instead, to say something cultural perspective in wearing masks. So could Christine, can you try to connecting Raymond LI, please? Raymond is actually a quite experienced journalist for 20 years. He was working for BBC World Service as the Chinese section head before when the Britain exit to the EU. I managed to invite him to join Hong Kong Baptist University to deliver his teaching and research. He actually has a lot of things to say about British culture and the Chinese culture regarding how to see wearing masks.
Professor Huang Yu,
Hello.
excuse me for interrupting. Your speaker, Dr. Lun Chang, has joined you now. If he could kindly unmute himself, he'll...
Oh, okay. Dr. Zhang Wen coming again.
No, that is Raymond. Oh, this is, sorry, this is Raymond LI.
Yeah, this is Raymond. Raymond actually, he stayed and living in Britain for many years and used to work for BBC World Service. Especially, he was the first Chinese, is the head of the Chinese service. So now may I invite Raymond to say something about the cultural difference in understanding wearing masks. Hello, Raymond.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Professor Hong, and hello, everyone. It's my honor and pleasure to share my personal observation on the change of attitudes in the UK and also in Europe, by large, towards the wearing facial masks. I remember, and at the beginning, say, for example, in early March, when the COVID-19 just outbroke in the UK, many of my old friends in the UK, and of course in the Chinese community, they were all complaining about the discrimination they were facing with in the UK by local people when they actually went out and worn their facial masks. It was a really serious situation. Even some of them were actually attacked by some local people in the UK because they were wearing masks. And then for quite a long time, I would say, there was a big debate in the UK as well, even among media, that whether wearing masks is something really useful to stop the I would say the spread of the COVID-19. And even in the local medical, I would say, profession in the UK, some senior doctors, they have, I would say, very divided in opinion as well. Some of them will argue that it is effective, but then some of them say actually it's not actually more useful than, say, just washing hands or keep you tidy and clean. So in the way that at the very beginning we can see the kind of like the medical solution becomes like a cultural, serious cultural division in the country, and also like a social division and in the country as well. And beyond the UK, in Europe, similar situation also took place in France or even in Germany. So we also witnessed, I would say, very huge division in the I would say cultural attitudes or opinions towards the using of facial masks. However, in the UK, once when the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and because of a contraction of the disease, and then went into the hospital, and also for some time even was taken care in the ICU for the seriousness, and the whole situation, or the whole I would say the coverage on the use of facial masks in the UK changed completely. And then after actually Boris Johnson recovered from his disease, he ordered in the way and order the kind of the making a law by asking people in the UK to wear masks in public transport. And then gradually, even nowadays we can see, even if you go to all the indoor areas in the UK, now it's actually illegal for people not wearing the masks. So you can see the huge change and towards the attitudes to the wearing of masks. But even I can witness the change of attitudes in the media coverage on this as well in the UK or even in other European countries. In the way people are more positive towards the usage of masks. So what I can say is this is a very good example illustrating things can change. And even a few months ago, we were worrying about whether we could actually wear the masks when we go out in the UK or in other European countries. Nowadays, we don't need to worry anymore. But still, in the UK, there's still minority of people who are still against using the facial mask these days. So in a way, there's still a group of people who are very strong against this. Even a few weeks ago, during the weekends, we saw various group of people in the UK or in other European countries were demonstrating against actually using the facial masks and also other lockdown measures imposed by the government to stop the outbreak of the COVID-19. So I would say the cultural battle on the usage of the facial mask is still continuing in that part of the world. So that's, I think, in a way, quite interesting for scholars like us to study and investigate. So maybe I can stop here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for 3 speakers. Now we are actually enter kind of a discussion and a question and answer sessions. I have 2 questions now, and I would like to some of you to give some answer or brief response. The first one is from Ray. What is the difference between the wearing of face masks during the SARS episode and during this Wuhan corona pandemic in Hong Kong? So basically it says compare with the SARS period and now. So who actually going to answer this question first? Let's say Raymond, and you.
Okay, first of all, and when the SARS actually took place in Hong Kong or in other parts of China, and I was actually based in the UK, I still remember, and some of my friends who were working in Hong Kong or in mainland China, they returned to the UK during that period of time, and they told us what they experienced in Hong Kong and in mainland China, saying that everyone actually were wearing facial masks. To be honest, for people like me and other people living in the UK, we couldn't actually understand. Is it really serious? Because we didn't have such experience. So in the way that maybe I wasn't in a position to compare what is happening now in Hong Kong and what happened 17 years ago. But I can, from my personal experience, this time in Hong Kong and also talking to other friends, they say maybe because of their experience of wearing masks last time, 17 years ago, I think for them, it's much easier for them to adopt the same way and the same approach towards the wearing of facial mask. But then I think for people in the UK or in European countries, this is perhaps their first time facing this kind of challenge. So it's just I would say a steep learning curve for them to adapt these kind of new things.
Hello, may I refer to Rose? I remember, Rose, at the time you were in Hong Kong, right?
I was in Beijing.
You was in Beijing.
I was in Beijing to cover SARS, but I felt a change after back to Hong Kong. After SARS, I just talked about it's like the way of the individual, the way of the individual a little bit changed because people, it's not just to protect ourselves, it's to protect other people. It's like your as a citizen, this is your responsibility in a civil society because I think this is what people learned from SARS. But I just want to add a few things about like Hong Kong just mentioned about Dr. Jiang Yanyong, right? The whistleblower. So that also shows how important the information when the people facing crisis, because Dr. Jiang Yanyong was first accepted interview by Times. He also sent a letter to Phoenix, but was ignored. I think just people, I don't think that was intentionally ignored. It's just because sent to the wrong people. So, but SARS at the Times got the letter and conducted the interview, and he considered to be the whistleblower. And then the Chinese, the mainland media just followed up. But I want to say how important was the information flow, because in February, why the Hong Kong media, I mean, me and my Hong Kong colleagues, we were chasing those senior officials in Beijing. It's just because the Southern Weekly, Southern Metro, 南方都市报, they covered the story, but they also under a lot of a huge amount of pressure. Because the Guangdong, I think the head of Guangdong province, he was hated. He hated that story, and but it's just because the media plays their role, and we got a chance to got some information about that. And this time again, I saw the same pattern. I was frustrated. It's just because we needed to change the culture and learn from the crisis or learn from the tragedy to save people and to save the lives. And we talk about the culture of wearing masks. That's the passive way. I think that we need an active way to dealing with this kind of crisis. Pandemic. We just don't want it. We can able to stop that at the beginning. So if you didn't learn from your previous experiences, I was just worried and change the culture of governments. So I was just worried maybe next time it will happen again and the people have to deal with that. Last time in SARS, it seems like a regional issue. It's only limited in Asia, but this time it's just because of the traffic. I mean, people are flowing so quickly. And I still remember during SARS in Beijing, I was so impressed by the Chinese government because I just think, okay, as they tried very hard to stop the dissemination from city to the rural area. Just imagine if the Chinese government was not able to control those cases just within like Beijing and some cities. And if it's flooded into rural areas, think about the public health system and the other resources, that will be a huge disaster. So yeah, I think when we talk about culture, I think the most important thing is that we can form the culture which to make government more accountable. Because what the citizen did, we wear a mask, we take care of ourselves, but this is the public policy, how to the information flow, and how the health system to healthcare system to deal with that, how to manage the hospital, everything was to be conducted by the government and also public policy. Yeah.
Okay. The next question actually is very interesting. I would like every one of you to give some thoughts as well as response. It is beginning with a quote of Chinese who did not mind being scanned, tasted, and checked all the time because he felt life is more important than freedom. I also understand that from some of the Western countries, they thought freedom perhaps is more important than life. We seem to see a major value clash between two of these fightings. So which is more important? Life is more important than freedom, or vice versa? So may I starting from Hong Huang to answer, or perhaps give your thoughts?
I think it's a very, very practical question, and it's very obvious question when you look at the response between the Western world and China, for example, or you can even say East Asian countries. I think the thing is, the Chinese are very practical. Freedom is an abstract concept. As mainland Chinese will always say, when you talk about the importance of freedom, they'll say, how much does it cost? 多少钱一斤? So basically, you can understand the mentality of a mainlander or Chinese who basically value things at an extremely practical level. So it is not difficult to understand if given that they would value human life, their own life, before an abstract concept. That's number one. Number two is that I really don't think you can ask a people or a race of people who have lived one way or another for almost 4,000 years under imperial rule, and they have never experienced democracy, to actually appreciate or to actually understand some of the concepts that what the West would call universal value. These universal values were developed through Western historical experience, not Chinese historical experience. So for Chinese to understand the value of, say, liberty, freedom, fraternity, equality, and things like that, they need to understand Western history, European history, American history, at a much more profound level as a human experience and cultural experience. But I don't think so. I think most Chinese people already know more about the West, but very much at a superficial level. You know, Mickey Mouse and American TV shows, we know Game of Thrones and things like that. These things filter through because these are Western, these dramas, these entertainments are based on Western cultural values. So these are coming through. You're seeing a change of attitude in the next generation that's coming up. For example, if I'm going to open an account on a Chinese platform called Bilibili. And I'm really looking forward to that because there are only people under 30 on Bilibili. Apparently I'll be like really ancient. I'll be like the Egyptian mummy on Bilibili in terms of age. So I'm looking forward to that because yesterday when I was meeting the Bilibili people, they were saying, you know, these young kids, they're actually pretty well educated. They grew up in their netizens. They were born netizens. They grew up internationally. They're way more familiarized with the concept of freedom, liberty, and things like that. But they have their own Chinese way of dealing with it. So I am really curious about the next generation of Chinese and how they are going to view this. As far as the current generation, or forget my generation because I think we're too old to be considered as relevant. But even people who were born in the 80s and 70s, they would just ask, freedom, 几毛钱一斤. And I think that is actually at the bottom of the issue. And I think in the West, it's quite the other thing. It's give me freedom or give me death, right? So it's quite different.
May I refer to Rose, then Raymond, sir.
Okay, I would say this is, it's not like which one is more important than the other one. The question like that simple. So the only thing I want to say is we must be aware. So when the people in power created a problem and then to ask individual citizens to react by sacrificing their freedoms, that would be the problem. And also how to use your freedom for the sake of your life. And the procedures are very important because for some group of people, it might be feel much safer, but it might be other group of people, they are suffering more. So yeah, this is my, I don't like usually when people say, oh, yeah, freedom. And I also don't think like Chinese people, they're, this is like a cultural, the gene in the culture, because if you talk to people in Hong Kong, a lot of people in Hong Kong, I mean, a lot of Hong Kongers might disagree with this statement. So yeah, Chinese society is huge and we have a very diverse background because of the political system and also the culture, because the political system, then we formed under different kinds of, a little bit different culture background. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Raymond.
Okay, I think I would like to describe the freedom into different aspects, because of freedom to me and or maybe to many people in Western countries is a very broad concept. So if we talk about freedom of movement, I think I would say people in the UK will actually be prepared to sacrifice for the sake of people's safety. But if we talk about, say, freedom of speech or freedom of expression, that will be another issue. In fact, from what we have observed in the UK, I remember when the British government announced the national lockdown measures in late March. In fact, a lot of people in the UK, including those national newspapers or media, they were actually criticizing the government for being too late to introduce such drastic measures, because they realized from the experiences or what happened in European countries, such national lockdown was really necessary to stop the spread of the COVID-19. So in fact, they were supportive of government's, I would say, the restriction measures against people's movement. And after the introduction of such a national lockdown, and Boris Johnson's government's popularity actually shot up for quite some time because of that. Although I know even for Boris Johnson, he was worrying about there will be negative response from the general public regarding the first ever national lockdown measures since perhaps Second World War. So that's the one thing. But then on the other hand, what I could see also in the British press coverage is they were actually really questioning or challenging the decision-making process made by the British government as far as the COVID-19 and policies. So in a way, that's we're talking about the freedom of press or freedom of expression. So I think if we look at the freedom as a whole, I think people may be are willing to sacrifice some part of it, but not all of them. So in that sense, I will argue freedom by large, still actually important, or if not, more than the lives, but at least I would say equally important as people's life as well.
Okay, thank you. I actually also find one answer from our audience. I'm not sure she or he. He actually is a kind of practitioner of Chinese medicine in Melbourne, Australia. His answer is so good. I would like to read it, and part of my own thinking as well. I think one cannot separate freedom from life. Both ideas related to matters of human state, of being, or ontology. So this is a sort of things, very brave, but also very good answer as well. Now shall we actually discuss another issue? During this pandemic, we clearly see a kind of a culture play a very important roles. Roughly speaking, East Asia, kind of a few countries like Korea, Japan, China, part of China's Hong Kong, SAR, as well as Macau, and Taiwan. These societies all actually play a very important role of Oriental cultural obedience. While we see the Europe, North America, and a lot of people still don't feel it is necessary to wear the mask or lock down the cities. So these are the issues quite critically facing us as well. How do you understand the cultural value and the approach during this pandemic fightings? May I ask the panelists to give your own thoughts as well as your sharing? May I start with the Rose again?
Okay. I remember I read an article to, actually the article is praising South Korea, and said because of the Confucianism and the Confucius value in the East Asia countries like South Korea, that's why the South Korea government able to deal with the pandemic very efficiently, because people obey the rules, and quite like they're also using the same excuse to describe what's achieved by Taiwan. But I personally would not agree with that, because I think that South Korea, Taiwan, and also Hong Kong, we all both suffered from SARS, and the South Korea suffered from MERS. So it would, mainly because it was the past period experiences and how to deal with the pandemic and the lessons drawn from the past. So that make these areas, these countries and regions, as the governments, they can respond much better, and the citizens respond much better. So yeah, I always think like culture is a very important element, but finally, to deal with like a pandemic like a COVID-19, the most important thing is the public policy. So that's my thought.
Okay. May I invite Hong Huang to give your own thoughts as well as kind of a sharing whatever you see.
My own thoughts is that I think the fact that mainland Chinese public policy or health policy in dealing with the pandemic worked in mainland China has a lot to do with mainland Chinese culture. And when I say Chinese culture, I think in this instance, I will have to make it limited to mainland and not include Hong Kong and Taiwan. So it's mainland culture that we're talking about. But I think it's, for political reasons, it's disregarded by the rest of the world, including Hong Kong and Taiwan. But I think there are merits in both the cultural reaction of the public and some of the policies that has been taken in mainland China, that it should not be completely dismissed. I am in Shanghai, and this is a city that has recovered from COVID-19. And I'm sitting in the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. I need my temperature taken when I walk in. But the thing is, there is, you can't see it, but there's a little hand spray and a mask that they give to you to wear when you go out and things like that. So there are things that probably are painful to do, but somehow because that it was done. So I'm very eager to hear your keynote speaker, Dr. Zhang, who is from Shanghai, to talk about the policies in Shanghai, because what I've been here sort of every single week for every week in August. So I came here almost sort of very frequently and air traveled frequently during the past month and a half. There must be something that can be a takeaway for other places, despite the political differences, despite how much you do not politically agree with the Chinese government. When I fly to Shanghai, I come here, I go to restaurants, I just think, look, this is a city that what every recovered city should look like. So there must be something that can be taken away from this experience. And don't discard it just because of your political bias.
Thank you. May I invite Raymond LI?
Okay, and just to follow on what Mr. Hong Huang just talked about, I would like to look at the cultural values in terms of the differences between, say, Western people and the Chinese people towards the government's role in dealing with crisis. And I remember in the past, and in the UK, for example, general public were not that actually, relying on the government that much. They were very much actually, talking about a big society, small government. They believe that actually government cannot do that much actually in dealing with crisis. But this time round, things have changed. And they also actually look up to the government for the solutions. They also actually look up to the government to actually introduce measures to tackle the difficulties or challenges and issues. So in that sense, I would say there's some changes in terms of cultural values compared with in the past. And although there's still, I would say, some degree of mistrust towards government, but fundamentally, I think the attitudes towards the government or government's role in dealing with the crisis has changed quite a lot. Even nowadays, they are still actually looking for government's new policies to actually get the economies restart again, or even sometimes they quoted the experiences in China that look, Beijing government, although you don't agree what they do in many aspects, but then what they have achieved in dealing with the pandemic, there's something to follow and to learn from. So exactly, I think following on what Mr. Hong Huang has said, I can sense there's some kind of changes in cultural values. Although I can't say completely, but there's a big move already in terms of their basic cultural values.
Thank you very much. And I would have a kind of a last questions for every one of you. And basically, it is quite philosophical as well. I'm thinking of that for a long time. Recently, since the COVID-19 started, we're all facing globally big challenge, kind of a COVID-19, and it's different countries measures, lockdown, or many other, preventive strike issues change our life, change our mode of working, change our mode of consuming, all kind of things start to change. What do you think post COVID-19, the cultural, social change perhaps will evolve within these few years? Not only just political, but also cultural value, as well as like philosophical mankind future. So that's my kind of final question for everyone of you. The future after or post COVID-19 life. So starting with the Hong Huang, could you say something about that?
I think I can tell you what the future, at least as far as mainland China, is like after I've been on Bilibili, because that's what the future. I think the future generation will be actually extremely challenging for the current political system in mainland China, because the younger generations, I guess you call them Gen Z and millennials, are more self-aware as individuals, especially in major cities. For example, there is a very, in first-tier cities, which are and new first-tier cities such as Chengdu and Chongqing and these cities, there's a very vibrant development of LGBTQ communities. And so this kind of choice, which let's say 2 decades ago, or even 1 decade ago, would be unthinkable for a young person. And now they're consciously making that choice. And they're contemplating it as if they have a choice. Whereas I think a generation ago, people would not have even thought of the such things as a choice. So I think as they want more choices in life, which they will demand, and as they are more fluent on social media, it will be a challenge to any 3,000-year-old system to handle a generation that grew up on the internet and social media. So I think in the next 10 years, and especially after the pandemic, you will see young Chinese being way more influential than they have been before.
Thank you. May I invite Raymond to the second person to share your thoughts post-COVID-19?
Yeah, I would like to use one key word to describe my thinking on the post-pandemic future, which is relation. I think people will actually think more about their future relation with the society, their future relation with other people, their future relation with even other countries. Because I think because of the pandemic, all the, I would say, long-standing conventional way of dealing with people or dealing with others had to change quite a lot. Even now, we still have so many people and in different parts of the world. We are working on a remote basis, working from home, and we haven't seen the offices for so long. We haven't actually seen, maybe some of us haven't seen real people for so long. Yeah, only actually see your friends or your family members maybe through virtual platforms. So the relation, the nature of relation has changed. So how they can deal with that? And especially as Ms. Hong Huang mentioned, young people, how they will see how they deal with people in the future, in their future life. I think that's something not only people like us, but also for different members of the society to think about. And of course, even for the government, they also need to think about the relation with the society, with people as well. So I think relation will be a key word for us to think about in the future and for quite a long time.
Thank you. May I invite the Rose to give us some of your thinking?
About future, I think this is $1 million question. It's hard to answer that. I remember after 9/11, the way of life, I mean globally, the way of life changed. I mean, especially the social norm. Like before 9/11, you can, if you took the plane, you just feel free to walk around at the airport. And then the security check became like, you just consider as the norm. And for people, young people, it's just born with it. They never, I don't think they would imagine before, like an airport is like like the bus terminal. There's no security check and people are free to go everywhere. So I think, yes, the way of life definitely will be impact. I don't know what the scope and what direction it will go. But I do think people might learn some lessons from this pandemic. For example, like we just thought like globalization, people, we are living in a world without borders. But now you just feel, oh, that's so far down because countries can close the border and people were not able to travel and to visit your friends and families or study abroad. There's so many restrictions and we still live in a reality which our freedom can be limited by the government, right? So, and also I think the interpersonal relationship, as Raymond already mentioned, maybe for some people, they just feel, okay, this is great. We can always work from home forever, like a Twitter or Facebook and Twitter, you can always forever work from home. But the thing is, for some people just feel more treasure, I mean, became more treasure the interpersonal relationship because of this pandemic. So maybe make the society more cohesive. So I don't know. I think the future all depends on the individual, how they view or how they foresee the future and what kind of future they want. So that's why some scholars just read that awareness is the authoritarianism. It's gotten more popular because and more convenient for people in power. They want to exert more power and they seize this opportunity. So yeah. I just hope, I think for the future, everybody have a say. And as Huang said, the young people, because we just want a better world for our younger generation. And we are old. We experience the beauty of the world. And we just want our younger generation can have a better future.
Thank you. Time is almost close to our sessions. So thank you very much for 3 distinguished speakers, particularly to Hong Huang. She managed to arrive in our session on time and also give us a lot of thoughtful thinking. And also thanks to my 2 colleagues, Rose as well as Raymond. They are used to be all very distinguished journalists, now we are academic, teachers and researchers. In that sense, we can conclude our session. And also this afternoon, there is another influential speaker, Dr. Zhang Wenhong. He will talking something about global trade of pandemic, as well as Chinese experience in fighting with the pandemic. let us to wait until this afternoon, or others can at the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.